Hello everyone and welcome back to game week 4 of the 25-26 Slater and Gordon Premiership. They join myself, Ryan Sipper, alongside Charlie McClellan for the second game of the day, which will see Aspire take on Muscle Warriors. We go through the squads, starting with Aspire. They have Sally McNeil, Dan McClellan, John Bolden, Jordan Williams, Rich George, Tom Kelly and John Dixon. And for Muscle Warriors, they have Hannah Hindley, Sean Donaher, Jacob Vickers, Rick and Sean, Dakota Hannam. I don't suspect Henry Barnard is present today because he was not available yesterday. Two teams at very different ends of the standings. If we bring that up now, you can see Aspire with a win here would go up to 40 points and would match Teesside. I very much doubt that they will get 21 goals, so goal difference will see them have to settle for second. But if you glance over to Court A, which is also live on the WFA's YouTube, a huge game as Leeds take on Greenbank. I suppose the best result or outcome for the likes of Aspire is a draw there, don't you think, Charlie?
100%. Draw or a Greenbank win maybe would be the better of the two. I think Leeds winning would be annoying for Aspire, but yeah, I think a point apiece would be great because, yeah, as you said, that would see them potentially go into the last game week second in the table.
Yeah.
Which would just sort of momentum-wise and feeling-wise be much better than going in sort of third or fourth. So yeah, it's a big one, but Aspire need to focus on their own job. I'm sure they will be listening out to Court A, but you can't afford to slip. Luckily yesterday, Aspire, well, they struggled a bit in the first game against GBG Knights. It was 1-0, but some of the chances they missed. I mean, there's certain players that, all of the players actually, all of the Aspire wingers will not want to watch that one back necessarily because there were some absolute sitters. In general play, probably a 3 or 4-0 game, but in actuality, it was a good defensive performance from GBG Knights. And then West Brom, which was the big one of the weekend for Aspire, and that's where they'll be really pleased with their performance because they were really dominant. Other than sort of a 10-minute spell towards the end of the first half, 5-10-minute spell, they were the dominant force, scored some brilliant goals. Could have been more. Obviously, Dan McClellan had his penalty saved, and there were other factors that, you know, a couple of other missed chances, but yeah, no, Aspire will be really pleased with their weekend so far. They needed a perfect weekend to keep up with the pace, and that's what they've got so far. And now 2 games, which they'll see as potentially against lesser opposition today to West Brom, that they'll be trying to take maximum points for and add some gloss to that goal difference as well.
Yeah, completely agree. So the squads are lined up and ready. It was a tough day yesterday for Muscle Warriors, not least because they had to play 3, let alone their opposition. It was a 7-0 defeat to Leeds, a 6-0 defeat to Teesside, then a narrow 1-0 loss to West Bromwich Albion Throstles, which was far more competitive, but they were outdone by a moment of quality from Amy Wharton. But John Bolden has the ball in the centre. Paul Yates, our central referee. At this point, this is a must-win for Aspire. There's not too much deviation between the kit colours, so apologies if you have a little bit of difficulty distinguishing between us. John Dixon's going to test early on Hannah Hindley, and a secondary effort from Dan McClellan wide of the right-hand post. Early warning signs.
Yeah, good start from Aspire. I agree with you on the kits. It's like a red and maroon sort of clash. It's not too bad, but it's not ideal. Hannah Hindley in that nice pink goalkeeper top, though, which is very different from Tom Kelly's yellow. A good start from Aspire, moving the ball. Dan McClellan, I don't know that the shot was the correct decision there, to be honest. I think trying to recycle it and get the move back going again would have been better.
So the squads, Tom Kelly, John Bolden, Dan McClellan and John Dixon, the familiar 4. And for Muscle Warriors, Hannah Hindley, Rick and Shard, Jacob Vickers and Dakota Hannam as John Bolden trying to put it down that central channel. It's something he does so often that invites those front bumper pick-offs on the inside from his wingers.
So a positive start this from Aspire, who will be feeling a lot of momentum. I think if the games yesterday had been the other way around, and GBG Night's game, the frustration of that had been the second game of the day, then maybe the vibe wouldn't be as good, but because they ended the day with beating their old rivals in such a dominant fashion, they'll be very confident going into this one.
Yeah, just seen out of danger by Jacob Vickers. Should there be any updates on Court 8, we will endeavour to bring you them as soon as possible. But a huge thank you to everyone that's tuning in. Stan McClellan trying to see it back to John Bolden. You can see this brave approach. They don't mind occupying very high positions in the Warriors half. Nice front bumper pick-off. Not even a pick-off. He just used the ball's momentum in his favour. He was very stationary, Dan McClellan. Into the 180. A sight of goal for John Bolden. Quickly followed up by Dan McClellan, who reverses it back to Dan McClellan. John Bolden. Really nice passing patterns across the box. Blocked by Ricken Shah. Trying to look for that open. It's just reversed out of danger by Hannah Hindley. Dislodges that right post in the process.
If in doubt, just absolutely sends the ball and the post out for a corner.
So, corner ball to be taken by Dan McClellan. Front bumper of John Bolden. A nice defensive wall of Muscle Warriors prevents the opener. Now Ricken Shah with a chance to break away, but John Dixon across to produce a bit of a screen in front of John Bolden. Something we've spoken about at length on commentary, on the podcast, is the frustrations around this Muscle Warriors side, because they are steadily improving in the Premiership division, but the fact that they don't train together as a full squad really hinders any momentum, as John Bolden now and John Dixon combine. Back to John Bolden, unselfish. I don't think John Dixon was quite prepared to receive it. But their players are so dispersed across the country. Obviously Sean Donaher in the Republic of Ireland as well, which makes regular, high quality, consistent training almost impossible, as Sean Donaher now comes on for Dakota Hannum.
And Aspire take the lead. That combination of Dan McClellan and John Dixon bears fruit again. I really do believe that in terms of chemistry between wingers, there are very few that have a greater understanding of each other's play style in this league.
Yeah, they just completely switched off. Muscle Warriors, I think Hannah Hindley was almost anticipating that initial attempt at goal from John Dixon, which left the gap, or presented the gap for Dan McClellan in the centre. It's exactly what they would have wanted. Aspire 1, Muscle Warriors 0. John Bolden looking for John Dixon once again, who hugs this touchline. Back to Bolden. Dan McClellan, very unselfish. Good save from Ricken Shah. That would have been a superb goal had it gone in. But good defensive work from the former Aspire man. Dan McClellan on the edge. Interesting decision to go back to John Dixon there. Not only did he have very little room, he was marked so closely by Hannah Hindley. But they do come away with the set piece, which you know they can be dangerous from. Maybe Dan McClellan over to John Bolden. That is exactly what they intend to do, unselfish. Slight bit of confusion between Dan McClellan and John Dixon, both looking to attack that ball, and a well-played advantage from Paul Yates.
Yeah, I think Dan McClellan spun the wrong way there, potentially. Should have gone round the other way, would have avoided the contact foul.
Rickenshaw looking to bypass Tom Kelly. Just trying to play it off the Aspire goalkeeper. The whole ball has to leave the court, which it now does.
Oh. Little courtside camera. I like it.
Viewers and listeners won't necessarily know, but we have increased and improved our technology in the last week or so, starting with that Gameweek 4, the Championship, now the Premiership. We have the functionality of replays, analysis, annotations. It's very exciting if you're a commentator, as John Bowling looks to switch. Well read by Sean Donohoe. Gets a round of applause from Alan Murray. Of course, many of these players will be familiar with each other's games, being essentially sister clubs under the same umbrella, as it goes down to John Dixon, fed down the channel, and the follow-up effort from Dan McClellan, dealt with initially by Hannah Hindley. John Bowling on the edge, hovering. Something I know you've discussed on your own podcast to do with Aspire, but we have on the 2-on-1 is the lack of goals in recent years or seasons from John Bowling. But in Game Weeks 3 and Game Weeks 4, he's chipped in with some very important strikes which have helped Aspire secure the 3 points.
Yeah, yesterday was probably the most vintage John Bowling performance you'd see. 2 goals against West Brom. He is the top scorer in that fixture.
To Dan McClellan, just trying to flick it behind Sean Donohoe, which he does brilliantly, looking for that to tee up that 180, which he initially waits for, just guided out of danger. 8.5 minutes gone. Aspire 1, Muscle Warriors 0. Nothing to separate the 2 on court A. 0-0 currently. Bowling. That early goal just helps take the pressure off slightly, because at times Aspire have struggled against the teams that kind of adopt a low block and have them 3 defensive players. As it goes over to Dan McClellan, flicked off Hannah Hindley, then the right hand upright. Can he work it through? Just constantly flicking it off Rickenshaw. Is that fair to say that Aspire sometimes struggle against the more defensive sides?
Yeah, it's a weird stat. Aspire have only scored more than once in 6 games this season, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. They've not been free scoring. What they've been, though, is very, one, reliable in the big games against Leeds, against Teesside, against Greenbank, and 2, they've just found a way. And they play brilliant football, Aspire. I don't think anyone would deny that, but just that end product has evaded them at times this season, and in this game I think we've seen that. Teams like Teesside are so clinical. They take basically every chance they get.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and whilst because the title race is so close, we could see it come down to goal difference, but ultimately the job and the task is to get 3 points, and Aspire very efficient at doing that. Even if it is just 1-0, as John Bowling attempts an effort, and they're looking to ensure it's not 1-0 this game. Flicked over the line from John Dixon. They have been knocking on the door for some time now. And that takes the pressure off, which allows them to experiment slightly.
Yeah, relatively simple one by John Dixon's standards. Just flicks it in. Have you seen his goal from the West Brom game yesterday?
I have not.
I'm going to show you it at half time because it's so cheeky. But yeah, that was one of the easier goals he'll score this season. Just he ended up in a situation where there wasn't really much the Muscles defence could do when the ball had worked its way across there. Flicks it in. He's a powerful player, and yeah, doubles Aspire's advantage.
There was so much risk in that crossfield ball from John Boulding, but there's not many players you back more than the aspiring England captain, because Sean Donoghue was primed to intercept. The coolest customer in Nottingham as he just worked it round Dakota Hannum. Following that goal, Aspire did make a substitute. Jordan Williams now on, who gets his first touch, returning passes with his captain, flicks it towards goal. Not only was the gap not there, Sean Donoghue had closed the space next to that post. These two met game week 1, the first game of their respective seasons. 4-0 Aspire were able to win that one. A brace from Dan McClellan, John Dixon and Rich George also on the score sheet. You would back them currently to probably match and or better that scoreline as it just rolls out of play for an Aspire ball. They will be happy that there is no audible cheers from Court A currently. And as you can see, Leeds 0, Greenbank 0. I'll show you the live league standings at the halftime break as well, so you can see how these potential results influence things. Stan McClellan over to John Boulding. Switch of play blocked by Sean Donoghue. Nice bit of control from Dakota Hannum, but too close to his teammates. Slightly disappointing.
It was a good first touch from Dakota Hannum, just frustrating that the 2-on-1 has happened before that.
It's a really nice engagement from Jordan Williams. Dare I say Marco Diaz-esque.
Well, Marco Diaz followed me on Instagram the other day.
Likewise, and he's also clipped the podcast, and he's very appreciative of our comments and your selection of him in your World Powerchair Football draft. As John Boulding strikes it down to Jordan Williams. Sadly, John Boulding missed the cut. Wasn't quite at the standard for our World drafts.
Yeah, we spoke about this in the West Brom game yesterday. Greg was giving it the big one, and then John scored twice past his first pick. So. Yeah, that was good fun.
I will say my draft was the most Aspire friendly, with Dan McClellan central to how my team was setting up, as John Boulding looks to switch to Jordan Williams, but Dakota Hannum was in and amongst that passing lane. Took over into 15 minutes.
Yeah, my gaffer and I have been discussing quite a lot this weekend how good the team is. He's very happy with the resources provided by his sporting director.
It's Dan McClellan. Really good save. Looked almost a certain third goal. It sounds like there has been a goal on Court A. Not quite sure how there wasn't a third on Court B. Brilliant defensive work from Rick and Shah. And as you can see, Leeds, as they did so on Monday night, have taken a 1-goal advantage against Greenbank. John Boulding, cross, looking for Jordan Williams. It falls to Tom Kelly, brave out his box. Lovely bit of control. Just ushers it down to Dan McClellan, who fires it across the box. This is relentless. Crossfield ball. Jordan Williams going to have to drop off there.
Big goal for Leeds on Corte. But, as you said, that was the case on Monday night, and then Greenbank came back into it, equalised, and then ended up winning on pens, so still a long way to go.
Plays down for a corner. To be taken by Jordan Williams. Into the front bumper. Over to John Bolden, completely unopposed. That's way too easy for Aspire. Let's get a replay up. Dan McClellan, don't underestimate the role he plays here. Drives to engage it, leaves it at the last second.
Does he get a touch?
Ricken Shah, I'm not quite sure why he stopped his advancement to that other pose, but it's another goal for John Bolden in game week 4.
Yeah, so a late surge by John Bolden up the scoring charts, which will please him.
Williams flicks it into that top right-hand corner, but doesn't quite match the pace of the Aspire number 7. Two minutes remaining of this first half. Tom Kelly, a spectator for the action in front of him. Dakota Hannum down to Sean Donaher. Dakota Hannum needs to work on his placement. So often looks as if he's going to give away needless 2-on-1s. I know he's trying to get back to support. Jordan Williams returns the favour. Into the final minute. It's been a brilliant first half. And it's going to test Tom Kelly now, who just brilliantly just closes the gap to the right-hand post off target, but he did exactly what he needed to do to ensure that had that ball been going towards his goal, it would have ricocheted off his chair.
Yeah, that's one thing Sean Donaher has done quite well, is shut down John Bolden when he's been going for them big spins.
Lovely work from John Bolden, almost trademark. Now Dan McClellan picks up the attack. Jordan Williams has to be considerate of his placement, just switches wings, and now 25 seconds left. Can Aspire register one more chance? We'll bring you the goal replays at the half-time break and show you the live league standings with a potential 3 points for Aspire and Leeds. Into the front bumper. Well, certainly feinted to engage it with his front bumper, Dan McClellan. Never know what he's going to do.
Yeah, very unpredictable.
That signals the end of the first half. So let's go through the goals scored. Starting with the opener. Brilliantly worked those familiar triangles between John Bolden, John Dixon and Dan McClellan. Second goal. Not long after about 11 or so minutes. Again, look how high those 3 attacking players are, so an easy job for John Dixon to just flick it off Jacob Vickers' bumper. And then late in the half, it was a set piece. Dan McClellan acting as the screen. John Balding completely unopposed at the back post to cap off a brilliant first 20 minutes. As promised, the Live League stand-ins with half-time now on court A. You can see Leeds will potentially go up to 41 points from their 16 games played, the same amount as Aspire, who sits a point behind them. But it's fascinating. But that would really hurt Greenbank's hopes of a potential title, because they've played one more than Aspire and Leeds and two more than Teesside, who all currently reside above them in the standings. A huge thank you to everyone that's tuning in, to myself and Charlie. We'll be back very shortly for the second half. Hello everyone and welcome back to the second half of Aspire versus Muscle Warriors in game week 4 of the 25-26 Slater and Gordon Premiership. You're joining myself, Ryan Sippel, alongside Charlie McClellan for the action live. Aspire 3 goals to the good ahead of this second 20-minute interval. Give me your assessments, Charlie. Fairly one-way traffic.
Yeah, very much so. Sort of expected, but Aspire have been the dominant force. You know, they changed the squad halfway through the half, but nothing actually changed. Yeah, very much dominating this game, and they had more than an eye on Court A, where Leeds and Greenbank are currently still playing, still 1-0 leads. But yeah, this has been a very solid morning's work so far for Aspire, and for Muscles, been some encouraging signs. The high defending of Sean Donoghue in particular, but at the back it's the same story as it has been all season, just some really sloppy goals conceded.
Yeah, I agree, and Aspire don't look to be letting their foot off the gas early in this second. They have made a double substitute from the team that finished the first half. Dan McClellan coming off for John Dixon, Rich George coming on in place of Jordan Williams. So exciting to see how those two wingers combine with one another. Rich George has had a few opportunities, but just needs to get that accuracy and that intention right. This is out to John Dixon. I will echo the fact that Sean Donoghue has almost tried to play the role of great disruptor. It's almost an impossible task against these world-class players as John Bolden forces it into the box. Over to John Dixon with a sight at goal. Whistle in the mouth of Paul Yates. Wanted to give a 2-on-1, which he eventually brings it back for. John Bolden hovering around the edge of the box, which doesn't give John Dixon a great deal of room to roam into. Dakota Hannam via Rickon Sharp. Yeah, once again, 2-on-1. It's Dakota Hannam just not quick enough in vacating the space. John Bolden takes quickly over to Rickon Sharp. Flick to Rich George. He's going to try and push it back into the path of his captain. That was well read by Rickon Sharp. Eventually works the room, and would love to have seen John Dixon get that ball across to Rich George, because he was in so much space on this left-hand wing as you view it, the right of Aspire. Hannah Hindley to take. Rickon Sharp, the only clear option if she goes to Sean Donoghue. John Dixon is going to intercept, which he does, out to Rich George. It's just too predictable, and that has been the reoccurring theme. John Bolden switches play, can't quite get the angle. Over to Rich George, unselfish, combining, just wasn't quite shaped in a fashion that could have registered a clear goal scoring opportunity, but it's good pressure nonetheless. Falls to Dakota Hannam, takes it with him, waiting for that 180. There's just no options for him. And it rolls straight out of play for a goal kick. Substitute signalled. Jacob Vickers. Jacob Vickers on in place of Dakota Hannam. Probably heard the cheers from the Lee Westwood Sports Centre. A huge goal on Court A. John Bolden weaves it round Vickers. Confirmation. Leeds 2, Greenbank 0. I never want to say never, but that severely dents Greenbank's title hopes. All but ends it, potentially, because of their inferior point accumulation and superior games played. It would be a metaphorical mountain to climb now for the Liverpool-based side.
Yeah, it feels like this could be us going from 4 to 3 this week. I did say, I don't want to say I told you so, but I did say that this weekend I thought one of the sides would fall away. I didn't think it would be Teesside because their tough games come really in the last game week, and they've had a decently favourable fixture schedule this weekend, but I thought this could be a bad weekend for Leeds, Greenbank.
That's a corner. That is a corner. That came off Sean Donaher, that.
Well, not many appeals from the Aspire squad, so they clearly missed the touch alongside the officials.
John Dixon did have a glance at the referee, a slight let off because we saw Aspire score from corner in the first half. It's Jacob Vickers now. Very forceful, trying to dispossess. John Boldin keeps it in play well.
The defending's been much better for Muscles in this second half. Obviously no Dan McClellan to contend with now, which does make it slightly different, but still Aspire. A strong squad out there. Great pick-off from John Dixon.
Falls to John Dixon in the end. Just out of play. You can see the top 6 stand-ins with the potential 3 points of Leeds and Aspire. 40 for Aspire, 41 for Leeds. Teesside yet to play today, but they do have 2 5-fixture weekends to contest. And as already mentioned, it's game week 5, which will be the make or break for the reigning champions. Hannah Hindley threads it through to Tom Kelly. Sean Donaher, a little bit too aggressive that. Just pushing the ball into the back of John Boldin's chair. Ricochets off John Dixon. To Sean Donaher. Some very rare territory in the Aspire defensive box. Flick to Rickenshaw. Across the court to Jacob Vickers, a sight at goal. Blocked by Tom Kelly as Rich George tries to turn defence into attack. Boldin just waits to pull the trigger into Rich George's 180. The gap was never necessarily there. Jacob Vickers. I think when watching Muscle Warriors, Charlie, it's just very evident that they don't have the kind of the patterns and the tendencies that you would get for a team that trains regularly. And Rich George, as he did in the side's earlier meeting in October, gets a goal and gets Aspire's 4th.
Yeah, good finish that from Rich George. Full spin. Question marks over a potential 2-on-1 between Rich George and John Dixon. It plays on, and yeah, actually a really good finish in that near post.
Disregard the fact that that says Jordan Williams is Rich George, the goal scorer. John Boldin trying to work the ball around Sean Donoghue. Nice switch of play from Rich George. With a fairly high quantity of 2-on-1s. It's something that's been the case across Muscle Warriors season. And again, before Rich George scored that goal, he was talking about training and the tendencies, the patterns, the chemistry, the continuity. That's all developed away from the National League spotlight, and it's something that is not afforded. That is one of the most brilliant goals I've seen this weekend. The deftness of touch from John Dixon. He used the spin of the ball to his advantage and flicks it past Rickenshaw. That is sensational.
What a finish that is. Incredible. Just watch it back on the replay. I'm going to slow this down as well, actually. Oh, just flicks it around the back bumper of Hannah Hindley. Fantastic stop.
Some goal and some Aspire performance as well. Aspire 5, Muscle Warriors 0.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Be interesting to see now this double pivot of Dan McClellan and John Dixon. You'd expect John Dixon to come and get involved in the build-up play as well, which might be nice to see.
Sean Donoghue over to Rickenshaw. Aspire's most emphatic victory of the season. 6-0 versus GBG Knights. They'll be looking to match and or better it in the 8 or so minutes we have remaining. It's clearly a side playing with confidence. Not just that, the fact that that early work in the first half has given John Boldin the flexibility to put valuable minutes in the entire squad, which may prove decisive come season's end. Importantly, you haven't seen a drop-off when either Jordan Williams and or Rich George has come on. They've both been very effective. For that John Dixon goal, we're at such a good angle. Didn't look like there was a gap to be capitalised on, but John Dixon found it.
Yeah, I was talking. Oh, I didn't show you that goal from yesterday. I was talking about cheeky finishes, and John Dixon's becoming a little playstyle plus.
It would do well to be cheekier than that one.
It's not quite.
As Rich George, cheeky, just in front of us, as I can show from this camera angle, into the box. Just waits across, attacked by Dan McClellan. It's been an incredibly tough season for Muscle Warriors, who I think will be excited to press that big reset button, even if it is in the Championship division. And whilst, of course, it's not mathematically impossible for them to claw their way out of the danger zone, they haven't shown anything in the 4 game weeks we've played to make you think that they will be able to leapfrog the likes of Sevenoaks and or GBG Knights, as Sally McNeil returns the favour to Dan McClellan. Yeah, sensibly left. As you can see, Rich George over to take an option through to John Dixon potentially, but it goes to Dan McClellan.
I'm not sure on the initial positioning of Dixon there. Sat just behind Dan McClellan. Probably should have sort of moved out, created that square.
Jordan Williams comes on in place of Rich George. A decent cameo for him and a goal to show for it.
Yeah, very well taken goal. Spy, it's clear that they're not massively comfortable playing in this 4-out system. They're still trying to make it work, but may as well experiment.
But I have to say, beyond Leeds, who is comfortable playing that 4-out system now? Not even West Brom. The Pioneers have the personnel to execute it as they have done in years gone by. It looks as if Leeds are cruising their way to 3 points against Greenbank.
So it was contact from Dan McClellan, but there was a 2-on-1 committed by Muscles just before that.
McClellan down to the 180 of Jordan Williams, ricochets off the back of Hannah Hindley's chair. Just waiting for that gap to present itself. It falls kindly to Dan McClellan on the edge. They play right on the edge of that 3-metre distance. Strong play from Dan McClellan, who will have everyone would have probably seen. He's included in the official England kit launch last week. Fantastic to see. They like using Aspire squad members, don't they? John Baldwin used in the last one, I think back in 24.
Yeah. John Balding, obviously the England captain, was always going to be used for the first one. And yeah, Dan, very fortunate, very privileged to be called up to do the second one.
He'll be looking to get the job done this season to ensure that he's adorning that kit in Buenos Aires in October. But for me, it's a non-negotiable that he is on the plane. Nice switch of play. Jordan Williams. I almost want to see them do a little bit better there. I think Jordan Williams can initially be more selfish because there was a gap to be capitalised on, and then when he knows he's not going to shoot, he needs to be ready for the return ball.
Agreed with both. I think could have been more selfish and yeah, get straight to that back post. Assume that your teammate's going to complete the pass exactly where they'd be intending.
It is a fantastic accumulation of goals, though, for Aspire, but some of the early season work of Teesside and Leeds sees them have superior goal accumulations as we now approach the final minute. Sally McNeil shaped to engage it with her front bumper. I'm going to ask you for a player of the match, but it's difficult to say because there's been so much rotations in and amongst the Aspire squad.
Yeah, really difficult. But for me, John Dixon, I think, when he was first on, obviously got the assist for Dan McClellan's goal, scored one himself, then goes off and then comes back on, linked up really well with Rich George. And to be fair, I'd give him man of the match for just the fifth goal in itself, because that finish was so cheeky. So yeah, John Dixon for me the standout, but I think Aspire will be really pleased with the contribution of all of their attacking players in this one. And that's not just because I've got his dad sat about 2 feet to my right.
No, I would completely agree. We will show you that incredible finish at the conclusion in just over 30 seconds time. Leeds are going to win on court A. tick over into additional time. Paul Yates just glances at his watch on his left wrist. As McClellan tries to weave his way round. Dixon, switch of play. Sally McNeil attacking the back post. That will be the last action of the game. Aspire 5, Muscle Warriors nil. Clinical from Aspire, who are desperately looking to regain that Premiership crown. We just look at some of the goals in this second half. It was Rich George initially, Hannah Hindley trying to clear the ball, but it's capitalised on by John Dixon, and a nice gap presents itself for the Aspire number 11. And without question, Charlie, the pick of the bunch, your player of the match, John Dixon, with one of the cutest finishes you're going to see it all season. John Bolden, the provider, just flicks it round Hannah Hindley.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely from John Dixon.
But with it being full-time on Court A as well, we'll show you the live league standings. Leeds with a very good record with 41 points from their 16 games. Aspire, the only team yet to see defeat in the 25-26 season, but that draw column could come back to haunt them come season's end, but they are set to meet the two teams above them in Gameweek 5. Huge thank you to everyone that's tuned into myself and Charlie. I'm up next for Middlesbrough versus GBG Knights.